You're in the middle of saying something. Maybe you're explaining an idea at work or telling a story to a friend or even just trying to remember what you came into the room for, and then it's gone. The thought you were holding on to a second ago has completely disappeared. You stop mid-sentence, confused, maybe a little embarrassed, and the worst part is, you can feel that it was just there. This isn't a sign that something's wrong with you. It's not about focus or intelligence or how much sleep you got last night. It's about how your brain was never designed to hold on to thoughts the way we expect it to. We treat forgetting like a personal failure. Like if we were just paying attention or trying harder, we'd be able to finish our sentences without losing the thread. But that's not how memory works. Your brain isn't a storage system that keeps everything you're about to say neatly filed and ready to go. It's a live process that's constantly deciding what to keep and what to let go of. When you forget what you were about to say, it's usually because something interrupted that process. And the interruption doesn't have to be loud or obvious. It can be as small as a shift in your own attention, a question someone asks, or even just the act of trying to find the right word. Research into working memory shows that your brain can only hold a very limited amount of information at once. When you're speaking, you're not just saying words. You're also planning the next part of the sentence, monitoring whether what you're saying makes sense, and scanning for the right vocabulary. All of that happens in real time, and it's fragile. If anything pulls your attention away, even for a fraction of a second, the thing you were about to say can disappear, because it wasn't stored. It was being actively constructed. And when that process gets interrupted, the construction stops. What you lose isn't a memory, it's a thought that never fully formed. This happens more often in certain situations. When you're talking to someone and they interrupt you, your brain switches tracks. It starts processing their words, their tone, what they might be asking. By the time you try to go back to what you were saying, the mental scaffolding is gone. The thought didn't get encoded into anything solid. It was just floating there, and now it's not. It also happens when you're distracted by your own mind. Maybe you're mid-sentence and you suddenly remember something else you need to do later. Or you notice a typo in an email you just sent. Or you start wondering if you sound confusing. That small shift in focus is enough to erase what you were building toward. Even the way you're speaking can cause it. If you pause to think of a better word, or if you're trying to explain something complicated, your brain has to split its resources. Part of it is searching for the right phrasing. The other part is trying to hold on to the overall point. And sometimes, the point gets dropped. This is why you can forget what you were saying even when no one interrupts you, even when you're alone. Because the interruption is internal. Your own thoughts are competing for the same limited space. The uncomfortable truth here is that your brain isn't built for the kind of multitasking we do when we speak. It's built to focus on one thing at a time. But speaking requires juggling meaning, grammar, tone, and memory all at once. And that juggling act is unstable. It works most of the time, but it doesn't take much to make it fall apart. This doesn't mean you have a bad memory. It means your working memory is doing exactly what it's designed to do, which is prioritize what seems most urgent in the moment. If something new grabs your attention, your brain treats that as more important than the half-formed sentence you were working on. It's not a flaw. It's a feature. But it feels like a flaw because we expect ourselves to be able to hold on to everything. Another reason this happens so often is because we don't actually rehearse what we're about to say. We think we do, but most of the time we're improvising. We have a general sense of the point we want to make, and we trust that the words will come as we go. Usually, they do. But if anything disrupts that flow, the words stop coming, and the point we were trying to make becomes unreachable. This is different from forgetting something that happened in the past. That's a retrieval problem. This is a construction problem. The thought you lost was never finished. It was in progress. And once the process stops, there's nothing left to retrieve. It also explains why you sometimes remember the feeling of what you were going to say, but not the actual words. You remember that it was important, or funny, or relevant, but the specific phrasing is gone. That's because the emotional weight of the thought got encoded, but the details didn't. Your brain saved the impression, not the content. This is one of the most frustrating things about how memory works. It doesn't save what you want it to save. It saves what it decides is worth saving. And a half-finished sentence, interrupted by a question or a distraction, usually doesn't make the cut. There's also something called the doorway effect that relates to this. Research shows that walking through a doorway can cause you to forget what you were thinking about. The act of moving between spaces signals to your brain that one context has ended and another has begun. Your working memory clears itself to make room for new information. The same thing happens during conversation. When the topic shifts or someone asks a question, your brain treats it like a doorway. It moves on, and whatever you were holding on to gets left behind. This is why retracing your steps sometimes works. If you go back to where you were, or if you return to the earlier part of the conversation, you're giving your brain the context it needs to rebuild the thought. You're not retrieving a stored memory, you're reconstructing the conditions that made the thought possible in the first place. But even that doesn't always work. Sometimes the thought is just gone, and that's because it was never solid enough to survive the interruption. It was a spark, not a recording, and sparks don't last. This happens more as the day goes on. By the afternoon, your brain has already processed hundreds of conversations, decisions, and shifts in intention. Your working memory is tired. It's still functioning, but it's operating with less margin for error. So the thoughts you're trying to hold on to are even more fragile than they were in the morning. It's not cognitive decline, it's cognitive load. Your brain has been working all day and it's running out of bandwidth. The sentences you lose aren't lost because your memory is failing. They're lost because your brain is prioritizing survival over storytelling. It's focusing on what it thinks matters most. And in that moment, finishing your sentence didn't make the list. This doesn't mean you're supposed to stop talking or stop trying to express yourself. It just means you're supposed to recognize that the system you're working with has limits, and those limits aren't a reflection of your worth or your capability. They're a reflection of how human cognition actually works. The next time you forget what you were about to say, it's not because you weren't paying attention. It's because your brain was paying attention to too many things at once. And in that moment, it had to choose. It chose the interruption, and the thought you were building didn't survive the shift. That's not a failure. It's just how the process works. And understanding that doesn't make it less frustrating. But it does take away the feeling that you're supposed to be better at this. You're not supposed to be better at it. You're supposed to be human. And this is what being human looks like. Your brain is doing the best it can with the tools it has. Those tools are ancient. They evolved to help you survive in environments where finishing a sentence wasn't as important as noticing a threat or remembering where food was. They weren't designed for back-to-back meetings, constant notifications, and conversations that jump between 6 different topics in 2 minutes. So when you lose your train of thought, you're not broken. You're just operating a system that's being asked to do more than it was built for. And sometimes, that system drops things, not because it's malfunctioning, but because it has to.